Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing Thai property issues. We're not talking about title here. So we're not talking about things like conveyancing or sale and purchase agreement. We're not necessarily talking about that. Just kind of talking about, it's kind of a general video on matters ancillary to ownership of property in Thailand. And a lot of things can come up in either a landlord-tenant relationship or even when someone purchases property here in Thailand, be it a condo or depending on how it may be set up, somebody may be able to buy like a house in Thailand. Some things to think about. Common area fees are especially one that folks, when they buy into a condo, they sometimes don't necessarily look into. Or common area maintenance is another big one that people really need to have a look at and understand how the, whether or not the common areas, the hallways, the parking lots, etc., the pool maybe of a condo, is it being properly maintained? Maybe having a look at things associated with juristic person and, the funding of all of those things. Probably not a bad idea to look at because, it can be a rather bad situation to get into a condo where, the tenants aren't paying the condo common area fees and the common areas are starting to get kind of run down. That can be a real issue that I don't think a lot of folks think about. Another one, especially where you're buying standalone real estate, is the notion of what's called a servitude. We've done other videos on this channel discussing this. In the common law context, it would be referred to oftentimes as an easement. But basically a servitude is, it's land that may abut or it may provide access to one's own property. And that may be land that's owned by somebody else, and one may have to ascertain whether or not an actual legal servitude has been granted over that piece of property. And this can actually be kind of problematic, especially I've seen this happen where you have double rows of shop houses and there's like access points to get into the second row, and that thoroughfare, if you will, that throughway may be private property. And you may not necessarily have a legal easement. Now, there are certain rights associated with property ownership that are conveyed where you have to have access, but it may not necessarily be access on the terms that you necessarily want. Long story short is there's a lot of unforeseen is the wrong word. There's a lot of things that especially foreigners I don't think take into account that kind of factor into these things. Another thing to think about is things like electric and water bills, and this happens a lot more in a landlord-tenant relationship, but it can happen like in the context of something that operates on a move-on kind of system where there's an overarching sort of, it's like a juristic person that may maintain the overall development project, and then they pass along the cost of things like electricity and water. Again, it's all going to be very factually dependent. Long story short, you're going to want to look into these matters before making an irrevocable decision and having to pay to be in a place that, may not necessarily be optimal long term.